Alright guys, welcome to part 5 of the series, and this is going to be the last part where we actually do sculpting. So we'll walk you through my just polishing techniques for a character like this, and I'll talk to maybe some other examples too that might have some different techniques that I use. But on this one, pretty much going to be refining the missing pieces, like most of the armor, and then do some procedural detailing. I'll show you what I use to do that, and then also like hand sculpted details. Maybe also touch a little bit on layers and you know how that could be useful in production. And then after this, we're just gonna be moving on to just rendering. You know, also gonna be touching a little bit on texturing on this one, so we'll talk about that. You can see me here. I'm just extracting a piece from the shoulder pad, and then using the Z-Remasher, I'm just reducing the amount of polygons that I have on that, and the half settings on the Z-Remasher is pretty good to slowly bring the polygon density down without messing too much with settings. I just keep doing half until I'm happy with the amount of polygons that I have. And then here's going to be pretty straightforward, just adding those hammer texture to the metal. The same thing we did with the back of the head. So you see me doing that with clay and just coming in and touching the pen on the tablet to get that kind of texture. And I try to do it. You see me doing here, getting those sharp angles on the edges, just so the highlight can catch on that and give it a nice thickness, I guess, or a nice highlight on the chamfer. I guess called chamfer in Max, but anyways, just getting that highlight to look good. And I didn't have any concept for this, so I'm just experimenting a couple different things, and again, try not to get too attached to what I'm doing, but trying to add some sort of information. The shoulder pad's not going to be the focus of the piece anyways, but it's also good to have some sort of room you know, to the sides to make it a composition. So keeping it simple. I know I could spend a lot of time, and I also like trying to mimic some of the details that I put on the skull. Like that would be really nice actually, but I didn't have much time to work on this piece, so I'm just trying to finish it with some sort of cool detail on the sides. You see me doing everything without any layers or any of that. Like if this was for a production, I'll probably try to keep it as organized as I can, and layers are a very good way to do that. To create layers, and you know, when you start doing small details like this, it's good to have them, just because, you know, let's say you show this to a director or you know, someone that's involved in the process, and they don't like certain details you put on a piece. You can always turn it off or do something different without spending too much time cleaning up. So I either do that, or I just save a different revision before I even start doing details, just because I don't want to lose any secondary information, you know, before I start adding the smaller details. Once you start adding the small details, it's hard to clean up. You know, let's say you want to just remove those little hammer textures. I mean, this is a pretty simple piece, but if you had any secondary detail information or forms information, it's really hard to remove the detail without losing that second form. So you see me doing that on the cloth, for example. I can see I have those folds on the neck, and once I start adding like a cloth texture, you know, if it's like a fabric, then it's gonna be impossible to remove that texture, that procedural texturing, without getting rid of those folds or having to re-sculpt them. So that's when layers come in handy. So keeping those, you know, organized, or keeping your piece organized once you start doing that is it's good to have it. It's good to have that, and it's good to learn. Here I'm just messing with the shape and going back and forth with Dynamesh and then ZRemesher. Once I'm happy with the shape with Dynamesh, then I just ZRemesher so it cleans up, you know, all my hard edges. And then I have to just go back there with the clay, get those highlights on the edges, maybe a high polish if I want to get something to look super clean. So you can see quickly get something that looks nice. Then here I am just projecting some texture into the meshes, reusing pieces again. I try to do that as much as I can. So here you can see I was losing some detail with the Dynamesh, and I was gonna need to go really high on the Dynamesh to get something that looks nice. So I just used the close holes in the modified topology, and it basically just closed those gaps that I opened when I deleted a piece of it. And that's a really nice way to just quickly, you know, close a gap, and then I just use the ZRemesher to clean up the topology, and it gives me something really clean. Here I'm just using Control drag to duplicate those little ribbons. And then I guess when you get used to the new pivot in the new ZBrush is really good. You know, I'm just used to this one, so it's kind of my go-to. So here you see I'm just collapsing my layers because I'm gonna start doing, you know, small texturing and small details and texturing at the same time. So I have a small library that I just selected just for this with a couple textures from 3D Textures. So I have like you know, so just some wall textures to mimic some of the skull references that I have, and I did a radial fade on the alpha to get those edges to be super smooth. I guess with a blur gradient, and then I'm just using the drag with a standard brush to just drag them on the surface. So there's gonna be a mix of doing that type of technique, and then just some hand sculpting things like you're seeing right now. I'm using them standard, and this phase I'm using references on the side, and I'm just trying to recreate what I see on like a real skull reference. So drag and dropping, adding those textures in gives me, and I do that with a lot of things, that gives me, I guess, a different idea that when my eyes are seeing for details, once I drag those in, I use those to help drive some of the details that I put on a piece. So I might create a certain type of texture, in this case, like those little holes, that might drive my brushes, you know, to flow nicely with that. And that's a mix that I think you should always be looking for, of just starting with a real, you know, alpha texture, and then from there, like you can definitely see me doing it here. From that, you just add extra textures that help mimic that flow. That is gonna make your small details look very natural. If you try to do everything, you know, by hand, it's probably gonna take time. But you know, if you have enough experience, you can obviously get to a good quality. There's a bunch of artists that use that technique, but for me, it's much faster if I use this mix of real texturing and then coming in and adding you know, adding some custom stuff on top, making you know, breaking it up, making it feel like it's hand sculpted. Here you can see I'm using a different texture in a different alpha, but now you know, with color on, I'm actually doing a good mix of a little bit of texture, a little bit of color. And the good thing about this is that my color actually is gonna follow some of my details. So that's the reason I'm trying to do it together. And again, this is a mix, like each project requires a different type of approach. I'm pretty much showing you guys here like a bunch of different techniques that I use. Here I'm going with clay tubes instead of them standard, and actually adding a little bit of those cracks, and it gives a different feeling as well. You know, the dam standard is more for the little lines and little very thin cracks. The clay tubes gives it a nice texture as well. So you see here I'm adding color with an alpha, and that's gonna give me almost that skin breakup into the color. So just drag and dropping it in there, and the final texture is a mix of a layering of a lot of different colors and textures and alphas. So here you see I'm just building it up as I go. So I'm using that same concrete alpha, and okay, this is a different technique. So you see me, I stored a morph target before I even start dragging those alphas in the piece. You can see on the right corner that I have a morph target stored, and I'm just kind of heavy-handed dragging those alpha details into the piece. Those are very strong details, and then with the morph brush, what I'm doing is I'm painting those details out. So since I had a morph target stored with when the mesh was clean, now I can go back and paint those details out, like revert to the old state when I store that morph target. So this is pretty much what I'm doing. This gives me a nice control over maybe I just want to use a certain part of that alpha. That was a very strong alpha, so if I drag on the entire model, it's like super heavy-handed and crazy. So I can paint those 90% of that out and just leave a certain piece that I'm interested on. That's a good technique that I use it quite a lot. Often it's very hard to find a very perfect alpha, so you don't want to spend a lot of time painting that stuff in Photoshop or spending a lot of time on your alpha. So it's a good technique to just speed up the process. So I'm going back in with the damp standard and just breaking up those little cracks. This is the final stage. You see everything it's 90% there. I'm not messing with shapes, I'm not messing with forms anymore. I'm just going in and breaking it up. So that's what I'm saying. I try not to add detail early on, or not to spend too much time on this, because the model is already pretty much solved. I'm just adding the final close-up details. Now with the different texture, I'm just adding that texture variation. So drag and dropping that texture in. And going back in, breaking up that since this is a more realistic piece, or a realistic finish, I would say that every flat surface, if you look at the spec and it's catching like really clean, that's when I want to go in and break it up a little bit. Even if it's with a very thin or very small surface detail, that's going to make a difference on the final piece, because everything is going to react to the specular, right? The reflection. If the piece is like too clean, then you want to go in and break it up a little bit so it gives it a nice texture, and that's going to pay off at the end and making it feel more realistic. So again, just going back and now adding just more details and painting that out with the morph target again. You can see it's a very gives them a very nice control over where I want specific details. And I feel that these are pretty much all the techniques that I use for more custom details like this. I'll show you guys how I do more of a procedural technique. I'm just adding cracks here with the damp standard. I also use the slash brush to do that kind of stuff, and it's very important to break the symmetry at this point, So for procedural stuff, I try to, once I do the ZRemesher phase, I try to make UVs or automatic UVs for every piece, just to have that handy when I need it. And it's a very easy process of going with that Z plugin, the UV master, and just adding those UVs. Because when I come to this part of adding a certain alpha texture, tieable alpha texture, if I do it by UVs, it gives me a way nicer result of doing it by just by the box mapping that ZBrush has. You can see me here again, not getting attached to what I sculpted before. You know, that was feeling kind of off, so just going back in and sculpting more of a tight type of fabric. And I'm using, you see, the inflate brush, because if I would use standard on this type of mesh here, you see it has a very small thickness. It will start messing up all my you know, the mesh will start colliding with each other. It's gonna mess up all my geometry. So that's the reason why I'm using inflate, because inflate pushes the mesh on the front and on the back to the outside. So this way it's gonna give me actual thickness, and it's not gonna start you know, getting all the geometry welded together, I guess, or yeah, messed up together. So I use a very nice lazy mouse for this, for the very thin lines, and then, you know, that's gonna help train my eye. I just drew a bunch of lines early on, and then you can see I'm starting to combine a couple of them. So the first lines that I did help my eye to see a little bit of the folds, and then it's almost like on the sketching, when you're drawing something on a paper, you do a very I guess low opacity sketch, just so you can start seeing the piece, and that's kind of what I did here for my folds. So yeah, so even this piece I have UVs because I can go in now and add those tileable details. So, you know, by you know, just saying that with the tileable details, I feel that those are all my techniques for tertiary details. I do some different stuff for faces, like when I need to project a specific detail, like you know, if I have some sort of displacement map that has a nice detail of lips or something like that, then I guess that's a different technique, where, you know, if I have UVs, I can actually place those textures into the UVs and then bring it in as an alpha, and then just inflate that alpha based on UVs. But that's a different technique. You can see me here using Dempster and the slash brush to add those cuts into the mesh. Again, just adding those final details and trying to break the symmetry at this point. And clay buildup is a very nice brush to do those little dents and cracks. Again, you see here on where I just put those little dents, like you see how the specular reacts to it, right? And that's what we're looking for at this phase. We're looking for that's the specular breakup. You know, like, just look at ZBrush is really good for that. Different from other softwares, I feel like, that it gives you a nice idea of how the shader is going to behave at the end. So be you know, trying to look for those specular highlights, and that's why adding different materials is helpful. You can see I have different specular highlights for everything that's going to be metal versus everything that's going to be you know, bone, I guess, or fabric. And I did that, you know, with just filling an object with a different material. So for a piece like this that already have UVs, I use the noise maker, and then if you do it by UVs, I'm just splitting the outside because I don't want details on that. But for the inside, since that has UVs and I use the noise maker, I have a tileable fabric texture, and that's basically just gonna tile all my detail into the UVs. So you can do that with different things. You can do that with leather. You can do that with you know, of course, fabric or skin, or doesn't matter what it is. You can get a nice tileable map, you know, displace around the geometry real easy. As you can see, I just accept that. I have a little bit of diffuse as well, apply to the mesh. See, I'm gonna try a different one, because I think this one is probably too clean for what it is. So just tried a different alpha, and I'm happy with this one. And then again, I stored a morph target before I even did that, so you see how easy it is to just remove that detail information with the morph brush. So that's a really nice technique. So I feel that the details are pretty much done at this point. I'm just adding a little bit of fabric information, and that's it. You see different fabric. Trying to get a different type of feeling on that one. But yeah, now it feels like everything is detailed at this point. So I'll probably use this with the transpose master to just get a little bit of pose, or maybe I don't even gonna do that. We'll see. But yeah, that's it. We'll jump into some rendering and composition on the next video, and we'll wrap this up. Thank you guys.